John had always been the kind of person who walked through life quietly, noticing things that others often missed. That evening, he was heading home after a long day at the office. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the gentle chill of early evening. People hurried past him, each lost in their own thoughts, eager to get home or meet someone, while John walked at his own steady pace, enjoying the calm of the city slowing down around him as he turned into the small park near his apartment. He noticed someone sitting alone on a worn-out bench under a large tree. She was hunched over, shoulders shaking slightly as if holding back tears, and her fingers nervously fidgeted with something in her hands. Most people would have kept walking, assuming she didn't want to be disturbed, but something made John pause. There was a visible pain in her posture, an almost silent plea for help that tugged at his heart. He hesitated for a moment, thinking maybe she wanted to be alone. But his curiosity mixed with concern won over any hesitation. Slowly he approached, keeping his steps gentle so as not to startle her. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" The woman looked up abruptly, eyes red and glistening. She quickly wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket, embarrassed to have been seen crying. "I'm fine," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. John noticed the tremor in her words, the slight catch in her throat that betrayed her claim. "Are you sure?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light and non-intrusive. "I can stay here if you need someone to talk to, or maybe help you with something if you need it." She hesitated again, glancing around as if making sure no one else was paying attention. Finally, with a small sigh, she admitted, I lost my wallet, and I don't have any way to get home. My phone's dead, and I've been trying to figure something out for the past hour." John nodded slowly, understanding her predicament. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I can help. Do you want me to call a taxi for you? Or I can walk with you to a safe place, if that helps." A flicker of relief passed over her face. "I don't want to trouble you," she said softly, almost as if the words embarrassed her. "It's no trouble at all," John replied. "Honestly, it's nothing. Sometimes we all need a hand, and that's okay. I can help you get home safely." She looked at him, eyes searching, trying to gauge whether he really meant it or if he was just saying something polite. Finally, she nodded, and a small, grateful smile appeared. They walked slowly out of the park, John making sure she felt safe and comfortable. He noticed she kept looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and caution, as if she had been disappointed by people before and wasn't used to someone offering help without expecting anything in return. On their way, she explained in broken sentences that she had been running errands all day, and somehow her wallet slipped from her bag without her noticing. I don't even know how I'll get home," she said, voice quivering. John listened quietly, letting her speak without interruption. There was something in her tone, a mix of worry and exhaustion, that made him more determined to help her. When they reached a small cafe nearby, John suggested they sit for a few minutes while he called a taxi. She hesitated but agreed. As he made the call, he kept glancing at her, noticing little details, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the faint worry lines around her eyes, the nervous tapping of her fingers on the table. It was clear she had been carrying this worry for a while. The weight of it was visible in every small movement. "Hey," John said gently. "I've called a taxi. It should be here in about 10 minutes. Do you want to wait here?" She nodded, looking slightly more relaxed. "Thank you," she said again. "I didn't know what else to do. I've been trying to figure it out on my own, but nothing worked." John smiled, keeping his tone light. Sometimes asking for help is the hardest part, but it's also the most important. "You did the right thing." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind of comfortable silence that comes from not needing to fill every second with words. John watched as she fidgeted slightly, then relaxed, finally taking a deep breath. He could see that just having someone there, even for a short while, seemed to ease her burden. When the taxi arrived, he helped her carry her small bag to the car and made sure she was settled. She looked at him, eyes wide with gratitude. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said. John shook his head. "Just take care of yourself. That's thanks enough. And remember, there are still people who care, even when it feels like the world doesn't. As the taxi drove off, John watched for a moment until it turned the corner and disappeared from view. He felt a strange sense of warmth in his chest, a mixture of satisfaction and relief that he had been able to help someone in need. What seemed like a simple act of kindness had taken more effort than he expected, yet it felt right, as if he had done something meaningful. He continued his walk home, the evening air, feeling a little lighter now. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one, and the hum of traffic created a soft background to his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that this brief encounter had meant more than he initially realized. It was strange how life worked sometimes. One small moment, one simple choice, could ripple outward in ways you never imagined. As John reached his apartment, thought about the woman in her situation. How often had people passed by someone in distress without noticing? How often had someone been too proud or too scared to ask for help? He realized that it didn't take much to make a difference in someone's life. Sometimes just a few kind words, a gentle gesture, or the willingness to listen. That night, as he lay in bed, he replayed the events in his mind. The anxiety he had seen in her eyes, the momentary relief when she realized someone genuinely wanted to help, and the gratitude in her voice. It all lingered with him. It wasn't just the act of helping that mattered, but the connection, however brief, that had formed between them. He didn't know her story, and perhaps he never would. But for a moment, he had been part of it, and that was enough. In his heart, John felt a quiet promise to continue noticing those small cries for help around him, to continue offering kindness when he could. That evening in the park, he had learned something important. Even strangers could leave a mark on your life, sometimes in ways you could never foresee. And sometimes helping someone else wasn't just about them. It could quietly change you, too. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm for John, but he couldn't shake the memory of the woman he had helped in the park. It was unusual for him to think so much about a stranger, but there was something about that evening that stayed with him. The way her eyes had softened when he offered help, the relief in her voice, and the small, tentative smile she had given him before stepping into the taxiette, all lingered in his mind. He realized that even small acts of kindness could leave a lasting impression, not just on the person receiving it, but on the one giving it as well. John returned to his usual routine at work, walking the same streets, speaking to the same colleagues, and performing the same tasks he had been doing for years. Yet, there was a subtle change in him. He found himself noticing small details more than before: the way the office cleaner greeted him in the morning, the exhaustion in the eyes of the delivery man, or the hesitation of a coworker who seemed nervous to ask for help. John understood now that these small moments mattered. Every day presented opportunities to offer kindness. If only one paid attention, during his lunch breaks, he would often take a walk in the park where he had met her. Sometimes he imagined seeing her again, wondering how she was doing, and whether she had made it home safely after that evening. There was a curiosity that tugged at him, a gentle concern that made him hope she had found some comfort in those days that followed. It was not obsession, he told himself, but a natural desire to care. Something he had always felt in his heart, but had rarely acted upon so openly. On a particularly quiet afternoon, John found himself walking past a small bakery on the way home from work. The smell of fresh bread and pastries filled the street, mingling with the cool breeze. As he paused to look through the window, he noticed a familiar figure inside. It was her. She was standing near the counter, appearing to be counting coins carefully, her expression focused and tense. Seeing her in that moment caught him off guard. He didn't know why, but his heart skipped a beat. He felt a mix of surprise, relief, and curiosity. He hesitated for a moment outside the window, wondering whether he should go in. Then, taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door. The chime above announced his entrance, and she looked up, startled. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and he could see recognition flicker across her face. The tension in her shoulders seemed to ease just slightly as she saw him. "Hi," John said gently, keeping his tone friendly and non-threatening. "I didn't expect to see you here," she blinked, then gave a small, uncertain smile. Oh, hi. Yeah, I come here sometimes. It's close to home. John nodded, glancing around. Do you mind if I join you? Just for a few minutes? She hesitated, but then gestured to the empty table near the window. As he sat down, she seemed to relax a little, but there was still a cautious air about her. John noticed the care with which she placed her bag on the chair beside her, as if protecting something precious. He decided not to pry immediately. Instead, he let the silence settle comfortably between them, filled only with the soft hum of conversation and the faint clinking of cups. After a few moments, he spoke again. I've been thinking about you since that evening in the park. I hope things have been a little easier for you. She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. It's been, a little difficult, but I managed. I didn't expect anyone to remember. John shook his head. I would remember. Anyone in that situation deserves a little help. Sometimes the smallest gestures can matter more than we realize. A faint smile appeared on her face, and John felt a warmth spread through him. He could see that she appreciated his words, but he also sensed that she was holding back something important. There was a story behind those eyes, a weight she carried that she wasn't ready to share. He didn't push her, knowing that trust couldn't be rushed. Instead, he offered his presence, patient and understanding. For the next few minutes, they spoke quietly, exchanging small details about their lives. John shared a little about his work, his routine, and his love for the quiet walks in the park. She spoke about her neighborhood, her daily struggles, and the little joys she found in simple things, like the smell of freshly baked bread or the sight of flowers blooming in a neglected garden. It was not a deep conversation yet, but it was enough to start building a bridge between them, one that was grounded in empathy and mutual respect. As the afternoon wore on, John realized how easily time had passed. He felt a strange comfort in her presence, a sense that he was exactly where he needed to be at that moment. He noticed the tension in her posture easing, her hands no longer fidgeting as much, and her gaze occasionally meeting his with a flicker of trust. It was a quiet transformation, subtle but unmistakable. And it made him realize that small gestures could sometimes create meaningful changes. When it was time to leave, John stood up, ready to head home. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. Thank you, she said softly. I mean it. For that evening and for today. It's rare to meet someone who just cares without asking for anything in return. John smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. It's nothing really. I'm glad I could help. And sometimes caring is all we need to make a difference, even in small ways. They parted with a simple wave, and John felt a quiet satisfaction as he walked back to his apartment. That day reinforced something he had already begun to understand: the world could feel heavy and unfair. But moments of genuine connection, even brief ones, had the power to bring light. He realized that helping someone, even a stranger, was not just about solving their immediate problem. It was about showing them that they mattered, that they were seen, and that kindness still existed in a world that often seemed indifferent. That evening, John reflected on the day's events. He thought about the courage it took for someone to accept help, the small victories hidden in everyday struggles, and the importance of presence over grand gestures. He understood that life was often made up of these tiny, unremarkable moments that could, over time, shape experiences and perspectives in profound ways. As he lay in bed that night, John's thoughts wandered back to the woman in the bakery. He wondered how many people had passed by her without noticing, how many had failed to see her struggle or offer a helping hand. He felt a deep gratitude for the chance to be there when she needed someone, even in a small way. It was a reminder that life didn't always demand heroics to make a difference sometimes. It only asked for attention, care, and presence. In the days that followed, John continued his quiet routine, but he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose, became more attentive to the people around him, more willing to pause and offer help. Whether it was a simple smile, a listening ear, or a small act of support, each encounter reinforced the lesson that had begun in the park that evening, that even the smallest kindness could leave an imprint. And sometimes it could be the start of something much bigger than anyone could foresee. A week passed since John had seen her at the bakery, and he found himself thinking about that encounter more than he expected. Life around him continued as usual, the city moving in its constant rhythm, but there was an underlying anticipation in his thoughts, subtle curiosity about what might happen next. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange connection to her. Born from that evening in the park and strengthened by their brief meeting in the bakery, on a quiet afternoon, John returned from work and noticed an unusual envelope waiting for him on his doorstep. It was small, cream-colored, with no return address, and the handwriting was neat but unfamiliar. He picked it up carefully, curious and slightly cautious. For a moment, he wondered if it might be a mistake or something trivial, but the curiosity was stronger than any doubt. He opened the envelope and found a neatly written note inside, along with a small card. The note read simply, "I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to thank you again. There's something I'd like to show you. Please come if you are willing." John stared at the note for a moment, feeling a mix of surprise and intrigue. The handwriting was delicate, and there was a sense of sincerity in every word. He didn't know what to expect, but he could sense that this was more than a casual gesture. His thoughts immediately went to the woman from the park, wondering if she had sent this. Could it be that simple kindness had led to this invitation? He felt a strange flutter of excitement and nervousness at the idea. The following evening, John decided to accept the invitation. He dressed neatly but casually, unsure of what the event would be. He walked to the address written on the card, a location in the quieter part of the city that he didn't often visit. As he approached, he saw that it was a building he recognized. As a community center that hosted various charity events and gatherings, he paused outside for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady himself. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a feeling that this moment could change something significant, though he didn't yet understand what. When he entered, the room was softly lit, filled with people who seemed to be engaged in quiet conversations. It was welcoming, not intimidating, and the atmosphere was calm yet full of energy. He scanned the room and finally spotted her standing near the center, her posture relaxed, but still carrying that quiet intensity he remembered. She noticed him immediately and gave a small, inviting smile. John walked toward her, his heart beating a little faster with each step. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice warm and calm. "I wanted to do this in person, to explain." John nodded, feeling slightly nervous but eager to understand. "I'm glad I came. I wasn't expecting anything, honestly, but I'm here." She led him to a quieter corner of the room where the noise of the crowd faded into the background. There was a small display of photographs, documents, and a few letters carefully arranged on a table. As John looked closer, he realized this was not just an ordinary charity gathering. The materials on the table detailed a variety of community projects, businesses, and personal initiatives that were connected to her family. He began to understand that she was more than the person he had met in the park. There was a depth to her life that he had never imagined. "I wanted you to see this," she explained gently. "These are some of the projects my family supports. I know it might seem strange, but I wanted you to understand that the world is bigger than our everyday routines. And I wanted to show you this because of what you did that evening. Your kindness mattered, and it made me realize that simple gestures can have meaning even for people like me." John listened quietly, absorbing the information. He was surprised by the scale and impact of these projects, and more than that, by her thoughtfulness in inviting him to witness them. It was a humbling experience, one that made him reflect on the idea that kindness often ripples outward in ways we cannot predict. The act of helping her had created a bridge, opening a door into a world he had never known existed. They spent the next hour discussing the various projects, from educational programs for underprivileged children to local environmental initiatives. John found himself fascinated by the details, the passion, and the dedication behind each effort. What struck him most was that she was not just a passive participant. She was actively involved, showing genuine concern for the people and communities affected. John could sense the weight of responsibility she carried, but also the sincerity of her desire to make a difference. As they spoke, John began to understand that this meeting was more than a simple gesture of gratitude. It was a chance for him to step into a broader perspective, to see a world where compassion and action combined to create real change. He realized that the evening in the park had been the catalyst for this encounter, a moment that connected him to something much larger than himself, and he felt a quiet sense of wonder at the unexpected paths life could take when one chose to act with kindness. After the conversation, she handed him a small envelope neatly sealed. "This is for you," she said softly. "It's just a token, something to remember that your actions have meaning. You don't need to open it now if you don't want to. But I hope it reminds you that even small deeds can create opportunities and connections." John accepted it with gratitude, feeling the weight of its significance even without knowing the contents. The gesture itself was enough to reinforce the lesson he had already begun to understand, that life often rewards thoughtfulness in ways that are not immediately visible, and that human connections can form bridges between seemingly different worlds. As he left the building, the cool evening air felt refreshing. He walked slowly, reflecting on the events of the evening and the quiet impact of his choices. The city seemed to glow differently, softer and more vibrant, as if the connections he had made had changed his perception. He realized that sometimes life presented moments of opportunity not as grand spectacles, but in subtle, almost unnoticed ways. And it was up to each person to recognize them, to act, and to embrace the possibilities. When John returned home that night, he placed the envelope on his bedside table without opening it. Instead, he lay down and thought about the woman, her courage, and the generosity she had shown by sharing this part of her life with him. He realized that his initial act of kindness had not only helped her in a moment of need, but it also created a connection that might influence his own path in ways he could not yet foresee. Over the following days, John noticed a change in himself. He approached his work with renewed focus, engaged more deeply with colleagues, and paid attention to the small details of life that had often gone unnoticed. The idea that one simple act could ripple outward and create meaningful change became a guiding principle. He also found himself looking forward to the next opportunity to connect, to help, or to witness the impact of kindness, understanding that life often rewarded attentiveness, empathy, and courage. One evening, as he walked past the park, he imagined her sitting on the same bench, no longer in distress, but smiling, perhaps thinking of the same events that had unfolded. It struck him that even brief encounters, if met with sincerity and care, could create lasting impressions, shaping the lives of both the giver and the receiver. John realized that destiny, in its quiet way, often worked through these small, seemingly insignificant moments, weaving a tapestry that only became clear in retrospect. John's life was still ordinary in many ways, yet he felt extraordinary in the understanding he had gained. The events of the past week reminded him that human connections, genuine concern, and small gestures could open doors, create possibilities, and change perspectives. He felt gratitude not just for the opportunity to help, but for the lessons he had learned, and for the reminder that life's richness often lay in the simple acts that connected one person to another. The days after the charity event brought a strange mix of anticipation and curiosity to John's life. Every time he thought of her, he wondered about the deeper story behind her involvement in those projects. He didn't know what to expect next, but he could feel that something significant was quietly unfolding. A path that had started with a simple gesture but seemed to be stretching far beyond anything he had imagined. A few days later, he received another message, this time a text. It was brief, polite, and unmistakably from her. "If you have some time tomorrow, I would like you to meet someone important. It is related to the projects I showed you. I promise it will be worth your time." John stared at the screen, a mixture of surprise and curiosity stirring inside him. He didn't know what to expect, but he felt compelled to go. The invitation carried an air of importance, and he couldn't help but wonder who this person might be and what role he would play in this new chapter. The next afternoon, John made his way to the address she had sent. It was a large, elegant building that seemed to carry history in its walls. As he approached, he took a deep breath, reminding himself to remain calm, no matter what he might encounter. The door opened, and she greeted him with a warm smile. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, her tone calm but carrying a hint of excitement. She led him through a quiet corridor. John noticed the careful attention to detail in the building. Everything was organized, elegant and purposeful. They entered a spacious room where a man sat behind a large desk. There was an air of quiet authority about him, but he greeted John with a warm, approachable smile that immediately eased the tension. "Thank you for coming," the man said, his voice firm but kind. "I understand you helped my niece recently? She has told me about your kindness and how you acted without hesitation." John blinked, processing the words. He had known that she was involved in her family's work, but he hadn't anticipated this level of recognition. "I just tried to help," he said modestly. "It wasn't anything special." The man shook his head gently. "What you did was remarkable in its simplicity. It takes courage and integrity to act selflessly, especially when no one is watching. These qualities are rare, and they are precisely the kind of character we value here." John felt a mix of humility and astonishment. The man continued to explain the scope of the projects, how they impacted communities, and the potential for people like John to be involved. It wasn't an offer of charity or patronage. It was an opportunity for real involvement, mentorship, and growth. The more John listened, the more he realized the significance of this moment. His small act of kindness had opened a door into a world of meaningful work, a network of people who valued compassion, integrity, and dedication. Throughout the meeting, he noticed her watching him from across the room. She had a quiet pride in her expression, not in a boastful way, but in the satisfaction of knowing that someone she respected had recognized the goodness in another person. John felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the way she had bridged the gap between his ordinary life and a world he had never imagined. After a lengthy discussion about possible roles and involvement, the man stood and extended his hand. "We would be honored to have you join us. Not just as a participant, but as someone who can contribute, learn, and grow alongside the work we do. Your perspective, grounded in real-life experience and genuine compassion, is exactly what we need." John shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. He realized that his life had shifted in a way that he couldn't have predicted. A single act of kindness, something he had considered minor, had connected him to people and opportunities that could change the course of his life. It was both humbling and exhilarating. They spent the next hour walking through the building, introducing John to other team members and discussing projects in detail. He learned about initiatives that focused on education, healthcare, and community development. Each project was a testament to dedication, careful planning, and a desire to make tangible improvements in people's lives. John felt a profound sense of purpose stirring within him, a feeling that he could contribute meaningfully to something beyond his own daily routines. As they concluded the tour, she turned to him with a gentle smile. "I knew you would understand," she said softly. "You don't see things just at the surface level. You notice, you care, and you act. That is why I wanted you to meet him. I wanted you to see that your actions, no matter how small they seem, can lead to real change." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. He realized that helping someone in a moment of need was not just an isolated act. It could create ripples that extended far beyond what one could imagine. His life had intersected with hers in a meaningful way, and now it was expanding even further, offering him opportunities to grow, contribute, and be part of something larger than himself. After leaving the building, John walked slowly through the nearby streets, reflecting on the day. The city seemed alive in a different way. The lights, the sounds, even the subtle rhythms of daily life felt enriched with possibility. He thought about the woman, her courage, and the quiet strength she carried. The realization that she had recognized the significance of his actions and had connected him to opportunities he would never have sought on his own filled him with a mix of gratitude and awe. That evening, as he returned home, he placed himself in quiet reflection. He considered how many moments in life passed unnoticed, how many opportunities for connection and kindness went unrecognized, and how often the smallest gestures could shape destinies. The lesson was clear. Attention, empathy, and courage mattered in ways that were not always immediately visible. By noticing and acting, he had opened doors for himself and others, and the impact of that single evening in the park had unfolded in ways he could never have predicted. John, realized that life had a way of rewarding those who acted with genuine care, not through grand gestures or expectation of reward, but through the quiet unfolding of opportunities that aligned with integrity and compassion. He understood that the woman had not only introduced him to her uncle, but had given him a gift far greater: the chance to see the ripple effect of human kindness and to become part of something meaningful. Over the following days, John began preparing to take on a more active role. He read about the projects, spoke with team members, and started to imagine how his skills and experiences could contribute. Each step reinforced the realization that his life was entering a new phase, one where his actions could influence outcomes in ways he had never before imagined. The connection that began with a simple act of helping a stranger had now become a bridge to a world where he could make a difference. He also reflected on the woman's courage in sharing this part of her life with him. It was a reminder that openness, trust, and sincerity could create profound connections between people. Her willingness to invite him into her world demonstrated a belief in the goodness of others and the potential for collaboration, growth, and meaningful impact. John felt a deep sense of respect for her, not just for her family's resources, but for the values she embodied: kindness, empathy, and a quiet strength that inspired action. As night fell, John lay in bed, feeling the weight and beauty of the day. He realized that life often worked in ways that were subtle yet powerful. The encounter in the park, which he had thought of as a small gesture, had set off a chain of events that connected him to people, opportunities, and experiences that would shape his future. He understood that true change often began with small acts of care, attention, and courage, and that the ripples of those actions could extend far beyond the immediate moment. The weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to John's life, a rhythm that was exciting but also grounding. His days were filled with the work of contributing to the projects he had learned about, collaborating with people who shared his values, and exploring ways to make a meaningful impact. Each day reinforced the realization that his life had changed in ways he never could have imagined from that evening in the park, when he had simply offered help to a stranger. Every morning, John would wake up feeling a quiet anticipation, a sense that his actions mattered, that his choices could ripple outward and influence outcomes in ways he had not yet seen. He felt more connected to the world around him, noticing details and people he might once have overlooked. The simple act of listening, offering a kind word, or helping someone in need had become a lens through which he now saw the world. Life, he realized, was built from these moments of attention and care. His work with the charity projects was both challenging and rewarding. He spent hours planning, coordinating, and visiting different initiatives, from schools that supported children in difficult circumstances to community programs that helped struggling families. Each encounter reminded him of the importance of human connection and of the power of small actions multiplied across a network of committed people. John found himself inspired by the dedication and compassion of those around him. He felt a growing sense of purpose. Through it all, he kept in touch with her. She became a guide, a friend, and a bridge to experiences he could not have reached alone. They spent time discussing ideas, brainstorming solutions, and celebrating small successes. John learned not only about the practical aspects of the work, but also about the value of perseverance, empathy, and thoughtful leadership. He admired her strength, not in a showy way, but in the quiet confidence and commitment she demonstrated every day. One afternoon, as they walked through a newly completed project site, a small community center that offered education and resources to local children, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You've changed a lot since we first met," she said softly. "I think it's amazing how one simple act of kindness can set things in motion. It's not just about helping someone in a moment of need. It's about creating connections that shape lives." John nodded, reflecting on her words. He thought about the evening in the park, the bakery encounter, the charity event, and the meeting with her uncle. Each step had built upon the last, forming a chain of events that had led him to this point. He realized that the story of his life had subtly shifted, that he was now part of something larger than himself, and that his choices mattered in ways he could not have predicted. That night, as John returned home, he opened the envelope she had given him weeks ago. Inside was a simple card, elegant and understated. With a few handwritten lines, "Remember, the ripple of kindness can reach far beyond what we see. Your actions matter. You matter." John held the card in his hands, feeling the weight and significance of the words. It was a quiet reminder of the journey he had been on. A journey that had begun with a single choice to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. Over the next several months, John's life continued to evolve. He became more confident, more engaged, and more aware of the power of his actions. He learned to balance humility with initiative, to act without seeking recognition, to trust that the effects of his kindness would ripple outward in ways he might never witness. He developed relationships with people from all walks of life, each connection teaching him something new about compassion, resilience, and the human spirit. One evening, as he sat quietly in the park where it all had begun, John reflected on the path his life had taken. The familiar benches, the soft rustle of leaves, and the distant hum of traffic felt comforting and grounding. He realized that the world was full of people struggling, unsure, or in need of help, and that he had a responsibility and an opportunity to make a difference. The lessons he had learned were simple, yet profound. Notice those in need, act with care, and trust that even small gestures could create meaningful change. He thought about the woman who had connected him to this new world. She had shown him that kindness was not just an isolated act, but a bridge to understanding, opportunity, and growth. Her trust in him, her recognition of his integrity, and her willingness to include him in her world had opened doors he could never have imagined. It was a reminder that the human spirit was capable of creating change when guided by empathy, courage, and genuine care. John's life was no longer ordinary in the quiet, unnoticed way it had been before. It was rich with purpose, connection, and the knowledge that his actions could influence lives beyond his immediate understanding. He understood that destiny often worked in subtle ways, weaving together choices, encounters, and moments of courage to create outcomes that were profound and lasting. As he left the park that night, John felt a sense of fulfillment and clarity. He knew that the journey he had started with a simple act of kindness would continue to unfold, shaping his life and the lives of others in ways he could not yet see. He had learned that true impact was not measured by recognition or reward, but by the connections we create, the care we show, and the courage to act when it matters most. In the quiet of his apartment that night, John reflected on the chain of events that had led him here. The ripple of that first moment of empathy, that willingness to help a stranger in pain, had transformed his world in ways he could never have predicted. He realized that life's most meaningful moments often began quietly, with a single choice to act with kindness, compassion, and courage. He thought about the people he had met, the lives he had touched, and the opportunities that had opened before him, and he understood that every act of genuine care, no matter how small, had the potential to create a ripple, to change a life, and sometimes even to change a destiny. The story of his life had been rewritten, not by grand gestures, wealth, or ambition, but by attention, empathy, and the simple power of human kindness. And in that realization, John found a profound sense of peace, purpose, and hope for the future.